everybody. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another Tech Thursday. This is our semi-regular spot where we come and talk technical and hopefully answer all of your questions about various different topics, including tonight's topic, which is autumn macro. Or macro in general. We're just kind of autumn macro because that's the season that's kind of shifted for most of us at the moment. So thank you for joining me. Please say hello in the comments and drop all of your questions in there. They're really, really important to me to be able to deliver to you what should be a fairly healthy 1 hour session with lots of questions, lots of kind of pre-thought about stuff that I want to give you. But hopefully there'll also be other things that you can ask me in the comments. Don't ever feel like you have to keep it on topic in terms of macro. If you've got questions about other features and modes or things like that in the cameras, then please just pop them into the comments and let me know. Now, first of all, very important for those of you that haven't been before, welcome. Thanks for stopping by. And hopefully this will be a great first Tech Thursday experience. I am by far not the best of our presenters, but hopefully you'll find it entertaining and educational at the same time. And also, of course, lots of things going on at the moment over in the US. So all of our thoughts with anybody who's currently dealing with very, very extreme weather conditions over there. Everybody stay safe as much as you can, please. Good. So loads of good hellos in the comments. We try to stay away from saying hello too much, but if I spot one of my favorites, you know who you are, then I'll shout you out. But it's always good to see some regular names and some new ones as well. And I can see that from here, you're all over the world, which is fantastic and really, really good. Please do give me any feedback if you can't hear me or things like that. Generally speaking, most volume issues are over at your side. Turn it up to 11. That's absolutely fine. But if anything goes crazy, I'll try and fix it. And please do remember that I'm here on my own. So I have to kind of like swing around and press all these buttons and do stuff. And also hopefully show you a little bit of a demonstration later as well. So fingers crossed, it'll all go fine. Now then, I'm normally very organized, but tonight I've had a bit of a crisis with the car. So I had a flat tire not so long ago. So I've kind of raced back, but I think everything should be okay. I'm hoping for no gremlins, but those of you that have been before will know if we get gremlins, we're just going to deal with it. So we've got an hour to kind of do that as well. I'm going to bring up a little presentation in a minute. We're going to just chat through the macro lenses and really what kind of separates the three main macro lenses that we've got that are dedicated macros. We'll talk about those. Hopefully that will inspire some of you to either grab them out of your bag, or if you've thought about buying one, maybe you'll go and buy one off the back of that and have some fun with it. But here is the place to really talk about what they can do for you. And if you're not sure about what level of macro lens you want to get, now is a really, really key place to do that. So you'll notice that I keep sort of casting my eye over to the comments, and I try and do this thing where I talk to you guys and I read comments at the same time. Sometimes it goes well and sometimes it doesn't. So I've got to try and be careful. I will try and not bring up any comments that have any bad language in them, although we never see that. You are fantastically well behaved. I love it. I'm just going to put one comment up that I just spotted. I now have to try and find it again. Because the user was asking something. Here we go. Chuck's question isn't directly related to the delivery of this session or the topic, but Chuck is asking about menu classes. Now, some of you will know that we deliver lots of excellent online Zoom sessions. 90% of those are free to attend. You've just got to register for them and show up on the day. And a lot of those are based on technical stuff, and myself and the rest of the excellent technical experts around the world deliver those sessions in your regional languages. So we've got English, we've got Czech, we've got Polish, French, Spanish, you name it, even Middle English. I'll do the Middle English stuff. And all of those are kind of going on over at the OMDS events page. So if you Google OMDS events, you'll find that. Chuck's asking specifically about the menu class that I run usually every month, Chuck. So I do a menu class for the OM1, which is aimed at the OM1 Mark II, but you can come along if you've got an OM1 Mark I because there's a few differences. And there are 3 parts to it. So the next part, I'm hoping, Chuck, will be in the start of November. And they're not listed yet, but they should hopefully be in the start of November. And I do try and run those menu classes once every month if I can. But we do get kind of busy towards Christmas, so sometimes we have to move things around. But thank you for asking. It's an excellent question to pop in there just to start off with. Let's have a quick look if there are any other excellent questions that I can deal with before we kind of get into it. Loads of hellos. Fantastic. I wish I could stop and say hello to you all and have a proper chat, but this hour will disappear like crazy. I'm going to raise this question from Jorge, who's asked, can OM expand the multiple exposure feature to allow more than 2 exposures along with overlay options? This would be fantastic. Jorge, I can absolutely positively guarantee you that this is a hot topic that myself and a lot of the other team members are consistently feeding back, and we will continue to do that as well. We can never put any guarantees or promises on what the R&D team will produce for future models, but we can promise you that we will lay it on thick and try and get as much as we can. And there are a number of features and modes that people ask for, and we do try and kind of push them through, and they go through this kind of priority sieve as well. But yes, we will continue to go on about that to the mothership, I promise you. Okay, so look, I'm going to just mark up a couple of questions here so I can come back to those. But I really want to sort of start talking about these lenses here. So just a quick flick through. And I'm also going to key in a couple of the ones that are sort of more statements. And these are really good for you all to listen to as other users have practiced with these lenses and different features. Okay, so I'm just marking up a couple of those. And some great ones coming in. So let's see if my buttons work. Oh, they do work, but that's not where I want to be. I think I look better. I don't look better there at all, do I, guys? How about there? Perfect. No gremlins, just me not knowing what buttons to press. Fantastic stuff. So we're going to talk about autumn macro, and I appreciate it's not autumn everywhere in the world. So apologies if you're going to have to wait a few seasons for this. However, when it does come around, there are some excellent things that you can photograph in terms of macro and autumn macro. The autumn season. There'll be a small demonstration, as always, at the end of this session, because I tend to get a little bit obsessed with things in autumn in terms of macro, morbidly, because things die. But when things die in nature, organic things like flowers and stuff like that, they can become a little bit more interesting as well. So we'll have a look at that, hopefully, with Big Pro Lens. Let's see if I can manage these without looking too crazy. Okay. Here we go. Right, so here are the 3 macro lenses now. One I've got on an OM1 Mark II, just over there. And that's the big one. That's the 90mm Pro lens, macro lens that I've got on the OM1. And in front of me, I've got the other 2 here, which is the 30mm macro lens, another superb and very powerful macro lens. And of course, the wondrous 60mm macro, the one that kept me floating through macro for sort of 11 years. I absolutely adore this lens, although I have kind of, gone to the dark side with that 90mm. The 60 still stays with me because there are always times when this can be used as well. And as you can see there from that graphic, there are different sizes. So it's really, really important to think about not only what the lens is going to do for you, but how does it fit into your kind of lifestyle in terms of how you want to travel. Do you want to travel light, super light? With that in mind, the 90mm isn't very heavy. However, it is worth taking on board that size-wise, it is a bit bigger. So depending if you're taking the smallest bag ever, can you fit it in and things like that. However, in terms of weight, they're all really light, really, in the grand scheme of things. So let's have a look at where these kind of lenses move forward from. The 30mm macro is quite often overlooked, I think, because it's not that it's a bad lens. It's a fantastic lens. It's a really superb macro lens, in fact. However, it doesn't have any of the bells and whistles that all the other lenses have got on there. So there are no focus limit switches. There's no IS in there or anything else like that. So it doesn't have this kind of like plethora of talents to throw out there. It has one job and it does it really, really well. The one thing you need to remember about the 30mm macro lens is, of course, that wider focal angle of view, which is sort of twice that of the 60. But also, in order to get really good magnification from this, and this lens will give you 1.25 times magnification. So that's, 1 to 2 and a bit ratio magnification greater than life size on the sensor. It will do that exceptionally close. So we're probably talking around about a centimeter, sort of 10 millimeters from the front element, that tiny front element. So if we're looking at it kind of from this perspective here, the lens and my finger would be that close if I was photographing my fingerprint at 1.25 times. Now, you don't have to. The key to sort of understanding all these lenses is that I can tell you can do 1.25 times magnification. You can do 2 times, you can do 1 times, you can do 4 times, but you don't have to do that. So these are the possibilities that you can push this equipment to. And trust me, if you want to push them, they will do it, and they will make you work for it as well, because the closer we get with macro, the more challenging it becomes, and we have to kind of do a load of different things. But you don't have to. So the 30 millimeter is a fantastic everyday lens, and you'll see there from these sample images, you can get some beautiful images of flowers at a reasonable distance. There's some leaves there that would have been shot at around 2 foot from above as well. But then also, if you can deal with all the other challenges that are part of focusing really, really closely to a subject, you can get superb images like the leaf prints that we've got down at below, the veins on the leaf and the skeleton leaf to the side of it as well. Now, if you're going to do things that close, you need to think about how much light you have and whether or not you need to bring in artificial light other than relying on the natural light. Because if you get so close to your subject with this lens and you're really kind of on top of it, then you're going to kind of shroud all that natural light out of it. So you do need to consider that. I do recommend the STF8 twin head macro flash specifically for the 30 millimeter because it gets so close and those little twin head flashes fire in real close to the subject. And then that means that you can get these super detailed things. Texture is key with the 30 millimeter. If you're looking for magnification and you're looking for macro, texture is the key to it, but you can shoot that little bit further away as well. So take a little look at these images. This gives you a sort of generalized idea, and it's by no means exclusive the things that you can shoot with the macro, the 30mm macro. You can indeed also shoot portraits with it as well. It's an f3.5 aperture, which at portraiture isn't the most impressive in terms of isolation for background bokeh, but at macro levels, f3.5 is ridiculous. You need more. You need like f8 because you get such a narrow depth of field at the macro level. f3.5 is more than enough. You just need to balance that with the light coming in, that's all. So a quick scan through some more of these questions, and we'll see if we can get them out. Here we go. That's a great one. I'm going to just star that one. How many have I got in there starred? Let's pull up the first one that I had in there. And there we go. It's from Deborah. Hello, Deborah. Deborah's question says, when I switch to focus bracketing and turn it to on, all is fine for that shot, but it seems to turn itself off after each set of brackets. This is on an OM1. That's an interesting one. It shouldn't be turning itself off. There are a couple of things that could be happening. If you're using a third-party flash, that might be interfering with it. I mean, I don't want to say possibly a Godox flash. They're brilliant flashes, but I know that there is some that aren't compatible. It may be something to do with that. Could be that you've got a button assigned to focus bracketing, and that's being pressed as well. But focus bracketing should be on when it's on and switched off manually. It is quite difficult to say, Deborah. Perhaps we can take a greater look at that if you can reach out to us in the comments afterwards, and we might try and explore that a bit further. But it should always just be on or off as you switch it. Hopefully we can resolve that for you. Let me bring in just a statement comment. Great to see one from Roger. Hey, Roger, RLR Photography UK. You just purchased the 12-100 Pro and amazed at the focus distance, hoping to use it for close-up work. Absolutely, Roger. So this is kind of what I said at the start, that we have these 3 exclusively designed macro lens purely for macro. And macro is, getting a magnification ratio of life size or greater. So 1-to-1 or more is your true macro. But the 12-100 is going to give you fantastic close-up work, as do many of the Micro Four Thirds lenses from Olympus and OM System anyway, because of the very nature of the way that they're designed, we get this really close focusing. So you've got things like the 12 to 40 f2.8 Pro, you can focus around 11 centimeters from the front element. The 40 to 150, the 100 to 400, the 300 f4, and of course the one that Roger's just bought, the 12 to 100 f4 as well, all super close focusing. You just have to bear in mind that if your intention is to focus at life size or greater, that's when you kind of do need to step down to a macro. You can, of course, crop final images to be closer than when you originally shot them. The implications of that are varied. So if you do want to get a greater than life size image, it is better to use a dedicated macro lens. Thanks for your great question, Roger. Let's pop that away. And we'll just take on, here we go, because we're kind of in that conversation anyway. I'm going to go for it. Ilibla has said, I would love thoughts on which one of the 3 macro lenses might be best for an enthusiastic amateur. And I'm kind of torn on this one, to be honest with you, because I always say, you go for the 30mm macro if you've never done macro before, because there's no fanciness to it. You don't have to remember to think about focus limiters, etc. However, you do have to be super close. So whilst you don't have to mess about with any switches on it, the other challenge is providing the light that you'll need to be super close to magnify. So I still always will recommend enthusiastic amateurs that want to achieve absolute macro to get the 60mm, because it is a fantastic lens. And hopefully we've got enough resources out there with the other technical experts and myself that can guide you through some of what can appear to be challenges when you first use the 60mm. So the 30, if you're happy to bring lights in or not get life-size replication 1:1, but if you do want that 1:1, you're gonna go for the 60. Absolutely. Great question. Okay, let's pull that back to the live section and let me see if I can bring in another slide. By doing that, hopefully, if it all works together. There we go. If you've got any questions that still relate to the 30 as I come back down through the list, hopefully I will try and answer them. I've just spotted a couple that I'm just going to star on here as well. Let's see, there and there. That brings us into 60mm macro land. The love of my life for 11 years. Love this lens, absolutely fantastic. 60mm, which if you were thinking about this in 35mm terminology, is a 120mm crop equivalent. So those kind of 100mm macros, 105mm macros for the 35mm cameras. This is that bit further, and it's an f2.8 as well. So we're going to set loads of light in there. But again, bear in mind that when using the wider apertures on a macro lens, you're getting the itty bitty depth of field, really narrow, and you might need to start enhancing that somehow with other modes. The 60 can be a little bit challenging at the start when you first start using it if you're not familiar with the way focusing distances or focusing limiter switches work. Now, there's a very unique focus limiter switch on this lens. If I pop this up to my little camera here, so you'll see there that there is a little spring-loaded dial there, and that spring-loaded dial will never, ever permanently sit at the 1:1 marking on there. It will switch to the 1:1 and then it will spring back, and that is by design. Now, the reason for that is that when you do turn it to the 1:1 position on this dial, the lens is simply being told to refocus its elements inside to achieve a 1:1 magnification. Very key, very important. You can't achieve 1:1 magnification or life-size magnification on this lens unless you are at the dedicated, the physics point, the mathematical point at which this lens can focus at 1:1, which is, we always talk about focusing distances, but I always talk about working distances. So the working distance is from the front element, focusing distances back here where the sensor is. Okay, so working distance for the 60mm macro to achieve 1:1 is 8.9-ish centimeters. So it's about 8.9 centimeters from that front element. And the easiest way to achieve that is to pop the camera, tell the camera to put the lens into manual focus, turn the little lever and it'll spring back. But you'll know then that the elements inside there have been set to precisely focus at about 8.9 centimeters and achieve one-to-one magnification. That's when you kind of do that business where you kind of go backwards and forwards until you hit that mark. If you're on a tripod or a monopod, monopod's really easy to do that. If you're on a tripod shooting a static subject, it's quite easy because you're in control. If you're hand holding this, you do need to kind of work on that technique a little bit. But that's how that lens will work. And again, the focus limiter switch on here will allow you to shoot further away as well. And this is an excellent portrait lens, again, with really nice separation and beautiful bokeh down to that f2.8 aperture that's in there. So the kind of things that you're going to be shooting with this are, as you can see here, we've got mushrooms, tiny mushrooms and bigger mushrooms, because you've got that flexibility of being able to shoot close there at just under 9 centimeters and further away. And what you'll notice as well, really interestingly, is if you look at this sort of top left image of this purple mushroom, there will be people that know the name of that mushroom. I am not those people. So please pop it in the comments if you know. We're going to go with purple mushroom. You can just see a little glint of those of a bokeh ball in the background there, which is probably some water droplets reflecting off something. And it's not circular. It's a hexagonal shape. So you get this hexagonal bokeh from the 60mm macro, which is very unusual and really, really nice. And it will vary depending on the distance of that light source as well. So you're looking at those. You're looking at hoarfrost as well. You can get really nice close-ups of that, tiny little fungi. And of course, the insects, you can get down to a certain level. This is a springtail, I believe. You can get down to about that level. Now, you want to go any smaller than that, then you're probably going to be looking at cropping, and you're going to lose detail. If it's a teeny tiny insect or pollen grains and things like that, you really need to start stepping it up. And we can get very close to that level, if not at that level on some things as well. But the 60 is a wondrous, wondrous lens. One other point to note about the 60 is if you are using it in manual focus and you're using the focus ring around here, there is a lot of distance. There's a marathon to go, because a lot of people say, you know, I turn this ring and I'm turning it, and the focus is so incrementally tiny. And yes, that is by design as well, because when you're shooting macro, you will be focusing manually through a very narrow depth of field, and you don't want to zip through it quickly because you'll miss your mark. So yes, there's a lot of twisting to go on that manual focus ring. Okay, so let me see what else we've got. I'm going to just mark up a couple of these questions while I look over. Please do feel free to keep bringing the questions in. And also, there's a poll as well. I believe one of our fantastic back of house elves, Paulina, has put in a poll for me because I was rushing around, just to ask if you were already an Olympus or OMSystem user or not. So if you'd be happy enough to just tick the box on that one, that'd be fantastic. Let's see. We'll mark out a few of these questions and then we'll get into them. Great. And I've just spotted a question from one of my favorite customers as well. So we're going to bring his question through. Let's see what we've got. This is a great question from Andrew. Hello, Andrew. Great profile picture there. Love that. Andrew's asking, could I ask what your thoughts are on using natural lights compared to using flash for macro photography? And it's a fantastic answer, and one that varies for me depending on the subject matter, the time of the year, and things like that. Interestingly, I like to use natural light in more kind of autumn seasons because I like that really kind of low sun level. You know, you get that kind of golden light, really low sun in the sky and certain times of the day. And that's a really, really beautiful way to use natural light because you get that warmth and the light kind of cuts through any water droplets and things at a really nice angle. So natural light in those instances I really love doing, and I love doing sort of natural wild flowers and things like that, moths and butterflies that are still out at that time of the year if there are any. But then interestingly, in the summer, I use a lot of flash to overpower the sun because it can be a bit too bright. So what I'll tend to do is I'll use a flash to try and darken some backgrounds that might be a bit busy and things like that. So it kind of does vary. Now, I'm going to be using a flash today with the demonstration. 2 reasons. Because one, I like it. I'm using a diffuser, which softens the light, bends it all around, makes the colors nice and deep. and evenly exposes the image. But also up here in my studio, it's really dingy. It's really quite, low light. And apart from this big old thing that's right in front of me so that you can see me over there, it's quite cave-like. So that's why I'm using the flash. Now, I do also have an LED light that I might use as a focusing assistant, or just so that you guys can see what's going on there. But the problem with that is that it's singular direction, whereas the flash with the diffuser becomes more omnidirectional. Which I prefer, to be fair. So I have mixed thoughts on it, and then it comes down to the lens. If I'm using the 30, yeah, I'm going to get an STF macro flash on there, really dig down deep in that forest floor and use that. But you can also use, a very, very, very good friend of mine and one of our ambassadors, Geraint Radford, uses the light from his mobile phone in very, very cool and creative ways as well. Great question, Andrew. Thank you. I know it was a bit kind of both ways answered, but hopefully it's giving you some input as to how I will shoot. Let's see. A quick one from Edward. Good to see you, Edward. Edward's a regular for our education courses, so nice to see you in here as well. How would you compare the 30mm to using the 12-40? This is also an excellent question. The 12-40 Pro is a superb, flexible, wide aperture lens. It's going to give you some fantastic results. At 40, super close focusing, around sort of 10 centimeters mark, but it won't give you a greater than life size reproduction. So that's the only thing I would say is if you're comparing the two, you need greater than 1-to-1. You need at least life size or a little bit more. Then you're going to have to pick the 30, whereas the 12-40 is going to give you a really good close up. But the flexibility of a 12-40 on a little wildflower hunt, superb for that kind of close up photography. Many people would categorize that as macro photography and enjoy using that. Great question. Thank you, Ed. Let's see. Oh, okay. We'll take Rosemary's question in here. Where do you find magnification in an Olympus EM5 Mark III? I have a 60mm macro lens, which I love. That is a fantastic question. And to my own shame, I don't have one of the previous menu cameras floating around. So Rosemary, if you can drop that comment when the live ends and we're not doing live chat, which is where your comments come into, the video will continue to exist forever. And people can point out mistakes until I'm very, very old in the tooth. And you can put a comment in re-asking this question, and whereby myself, probably me, will come back in tomorrow and give you some better direction on where that is, unless we have one of our excellent community members that's possibly going to find that out for you in the chat and give you a help. Haven't looked over there yet, but I would imagine somebody's already answered that for you. But if not, drop it in and we'll do that for you. And then one more before we move through that next part of the presentation. We're already halfway through the hour. Wow, is that blown away? So let's bring in Jason's question. I've tried focus bracketing many times, and often most of the frames are completely blurry. What am I doing wrong? So there's a couple of things that can go wrong with focus bracketing, and that is initial focus point and whether or not you're actually too close to the subject. So we talked very briefly on minimum focusing distances, and I converted that into working distance. So working distance is from front element to your subject, and focusing distance is from where the sensor is back here somewhere on your camera to your subject. Anywhere within that, inside that zone, the camera won't focus. So if you're trying to focus too close, then yes, you're going to get these blurry out of focus images. If you're using autofocus in very dim conditions and you've achieved AF at one point, perhaps when it starts bracketing, there's no contrast in the image, or the camera can't find a focal point, it's rarer. It's usually that we're too close is the issue there. But Jason, it might well be worth, again, after the session, drop another comment in, detail the kit that you're using, and we'll try and give you some more direction specifically relating to what you've got going on. I wish we could help everybody out like live constantly. We would be here until tomorrow lunchtime, and you'd all be very bored with me. So I'm going to leave a couple of questions back in there, come back over to this presentation here, and we'll move that on to the fantastic 90mm f3.5 IS Pro, Image Stabilized Pro Lens. So what I didn't mention was that your 60mm macro is weather sealed. So on the side of the, if we look on the bottom of the lens, you'll see that it has the words splash proof written on it. Okay, so I'm just trying to find it there. I don't know if we can see this just on here, but right at the bottom of the lens, see it says splash proof there, which means that the 60mm lens is weather sealed. The 30mm lens is not weather sealed. I really must stop chucking lenses around like that. But the 90mm lens, as pretty much all the pros are, is also weather sealed as well. So dust proof, splash proof, freeze proof to -20 degrees, IP53 rated to match the camera, which is fantastic on its own. And then it's got a whole host of other gadgets and gadgets going on with it. So it's got a focus limiter switch rather than a dial. Really easy switch now where you can go from 0.25 to infinity in terms of meters, 0.25 meters to 5 meters, which is restricting its ability to focus outside of those areas. And of course, S macro. An S macro will allow you to focus the closest at just over 8 centimeters from the lens front element, and that enables you to achieve 2:1. So if you've got this lens, you will not achieve 2:1 magnification ratio unless you're using S macro on the switch there, and it just brings it that little bit closer by realigning the elements inside to achieve that. Now, focus limiters are very important when it comes to macro. If you're not shooting S macro on the 90mm, then you don't need to have it in S macro. You can have it in the central point, which is 0.25 to 5, and that will basically mean that the lens will only focus on anything between those distances of 0.25 meters to 0.5 meters. And if there's something going on in the background that seems like attractive for the camera to try and focus on, it won't do it because it's not allowed to. It's been told, no, you can't do that. So really, really good for getting rid of any bothersome, distracting things in the background in terms of the camera clipping focus when you're using autofocus. Now, if you're using manual focus, the same thing will happen. As you turn the focus ring, you won't be able to focus outside of those limitations. But again, that's a good thing for macro because you do want to keep it nice and close. Whilst we're talking about focus, the 90mm has a manual focus clutch. Okay, it's on my camera over there, but I can show you this on a 12-40 lens just here, and it's the front ring that just pulls back, and it pulls back to show you some numbers behind it, some focusing distances, and you can push it back up to go to autofocus. Now, I use that all the time because behind the focus ring, when you pull this clutch down on the 90mm macro, it will expose the magnification distances. So I can get to 2:1 easily, or 1:1 easily, or 0.5, just by turning that point to the red marker on my lens. And then I know that if it's at 2 times magnification and I rock backwards and forwards until my subject becomes in focus, that's exactly the ratio that I'm hitting, which is super, super useful. It is worth pointing out, though, that if you use that manual focus clutch, you will find that focus stacking and focus bracketing are disabled within the menu. And that's because that clutch activates a mechanical focus by wire system inside the lens and takes away any automated control that the camera may have had. So if you want to manually focus with focus stacking and bracketing, you can, of course, do that, but you must make sure that the focus clutch is pushed forward and select manual focus from within the camera. Or if, like me, you've left the cameras on default, you've got a little switch at the back there, which is L1 and 1 and 2 switch just on the rear of the camera. And by default, if you haven't changed that, position 2 is manual focus. And that leaves the automated focusing system in place for things like focus stacking, because you can manually focus for your first position in focus stacking, and then when you hit the button, the automated system takes over. So really, really key to remember that. Some great images down here. A couple of these are from one of our fantastic ambassadors, Jamie Rosenkrantz. She's This Forest Floor on Instagram. If you're interested, it's the slime mold and the ice crystals just there. Some really beautiful images. If you want to go and check out Jamie's stuff on Instagram, it's This Forest Floor, I believe, with some underscores underneath there. Let's leave that there and just have a quick look at some of the questions. This is a great one. I'm just going to pull this one back up here from Mark. With the 60mm macro at 1:1, can you still do in-camera focus stacking? You can still do it, but you need to make sure that the closest point on your subject that you want in focus at 1:1 can be in focus. So if you focus, so let's say we've got a ruler like this, and you want to shoot 1:1 and get the whole ruler in. It's going to be a slight change anyway because of the way focus stacking crops an image. But if you can achieve 1:1 here, sort of a third of the way down the ruler, you can't achieve it here because it's closer to you. Remember, 1:1 is the closest focusing point that the lens can achieve. So you would achieve 1:1 at the bottom here. Knowing that you can achieve 1:1 there, you would refocus your starting position for focus stacking about 40% into the depth of the subject. The camera then can focus closer to you, achieve that 1:1, and then take also images further back as well. So slightly complex, but yes, it is absolutely possible. Great question. No, David, I did not take any of these images tonight. These are all from our wonderful ambassadors and people that go out there with our cameras that have far more talent than I do. But they can all be seen on our My OM System page as well, so you can find them all over there with our ambassadors. To my shame, I haven't shot much macro in the last couple of months. If anybody wants to send a letter or an email to my boss to say David needs some macro shooting time, yeah, absolutely, feel free. I'll send you a direct email for that. But no, these are all our ambassadors' images. Mick, this has got to be the mushroom question. Mick says it's an amethyst deceiver. The one that I said is just a purple mushroom. Mick, thank you for helping me out with that one. And Deborah as well. A few of you, loads of you have said it. I feel really uneducated in the fungi game now. Okay. So let's just bring this one in. Nico has bought the 60mm macro together with the lens hood. Won't the lens hood get in the way sometimes, or don't you get that close? No, you don't get that close actually. So the lens hood on the 60mm macro comes out to about here. And the closest you'll focus is about here. So it's almost double the distance of the lens hood. So yeah, fine. It's a nice little drop up and down lens hood actually for the 60mm macro. Good stuff. And Rosemary's question regarding the 60mm macro, how do you use the other things, the 1:2 and the 1:4? Well, again, if you want to exactly achieve those distance settings, then you can look on your macro lens. You want to keep your switch, let's see if I can get this into focus, your focus limiter switch at that second marker there, which is the 0.19 to 0.4. Remember, these are all the focusing distances from the sensor. Keep it there. Then you'll be in manual focus. And as you manually focus, you've got a little window. Let me see if I can just find it. I'll show you what I'm showing here. There we go. You've got a little window just here. And as you turn that focus ring, when it's attached to the camera, that little red line will move up and down in that window, and you will set it at the 1.1, 1.3, 1.2, 1.4 point that you want to achieve. Then when you know it's there, you got your backwards and forwards thing again, because it's all about if those are the specific distances you want to shoot at, then you can do. However, with that in mind, Rosemary, if you want to shoot with autofocus outside of 1:1, then pop your lens limiter switch in that kind of position there, the 0.19 to 0.4, get your autofocus working, and just make sure that you're at least 9 centimeters away from your subject, at least, because then you'll focus anywhere between that range. And depending on where it focuses, it will achieve one of those 1:2 or 1:4 positions. Great question. Thank you very much, Rosemary. Okay, so this is a great one. Alan uses a small battery-powered LED panel on a GoPro grip. Yeah, for the top, I'm assuming, just there. Fantastic stuff. Really, really good. And Arnstein has done a little bit of focus stacking with the little original flash, reflecting light from a reflector that you can change the direction of. Exactly. There are loads of really cool things that you can do without sort of spending a fortune in terms of bouncing light around. And also, here's the thing, is you're going to go out and shoot not flash, and it's a nice bright day, just, a couple of reflectors. That's the thing. Like Arnstein says, a couple of reflectors will bounce light back in. And sometimes as well, those reflectors can act as wind barriers, because the wind is a bit of a pain in macro as well. Okay, so let's see what else this presentation has to offer us. Yeah, we want to talk about features on top of the lenses as well. I'm just kind of aware that I have an hour, and I don't think anyone's going to stop me, but we'll go over it. We may go over. So if you're eating a dinner, grab your pudding real quick. We're talking about the assistant features. So it is challenging to focus sometimes with macro, particularly with manually focusing. So there were a couple of things in there. One of our questions, I think it was from Deborah, asked already about magnify in the camera. Now you can magnify and use something called Super Spot AF, which I'll show you a little slide on as well. And what that will do is it will allow you to, once you start to manually focus, automatically kick in a magnified view, as you can see here, that little slug there. Or you can assign a button to it so that you can press that button just to magnify the view and let you know where you are. So it can either be attached to manual focus as turning the ring activation, or to a button as well. And you can adjust the level of magnification from 3 times to 14 times. A lot of people start using it and it immediately zooms into 10 times, and that can be quite intense in a macro environment, and they don't know that you can actually wind that back. So whilst using magnify, if you turn the focus ring and you've got magnify assistant switched on, then you can actually use the rear dial or the front dial to demagnify or increase magnification, but only whilst that magnified view is live. Once you stop turning the focus ring, that magnified view will drop away and you won't be able to adjust it at all. You've also then got something called focus peaking. A lot of you are now familiar with focus peaking, and it gives you that visual guide to where your focal plane is. And it's not giving you an idea of the depth of field, because that's quite different, but it's giving you an idea of where the focal plane is. And as you can see here in this little image, you can have it in red, but you can also have it in yellow, black, or white, depending on the contrast of your subject. That's super useful. That's something that I'll show you in a second over on the demonstration. And then more recently, we added a focus indicator. And this is a very simple visual graphic that tells you more useful with the 60mm macro. You know how I talked about having loads and loads of run on the focus? You've got to turn it loads to get anywhere. Sometimes you can be turning it 5 minutes and then realize, actually, I've turned it the wrong way and I'm focusing on the mountains. So the focus indicator gives you a visual representation on your screen or through your viewfinder as to whether you're focusing it towards a little flower, which is obviously macro, or towards a mountain, which is obviously infinity. So that's quite useful as well. So really, really useful features there for manually focusing. And don't forget about your image stabilization. Really, really key. A lot of people forget that the image stabilization is linked to a halfway press. So even when you're using manual focus, a halfway press on that front shutter button will kick in and give you that kind of yes assistant. And you can see from that little graphic there that it is a huge amount of difference that it makes. And then now if you're using autofocus, obviously that happens when you halfway press anyway. And also if you're using the back button, the AF on, that will also happen as well. But don't forget, a lot of us do, when you're in manual focus, still do a little halfway squeeze on that front trigger to stabilize all that out. And at macro level, it's not a lot, but every little helps in terms of keeping things stable. And I even still use it when I'm on a tripod, because I sometimes rock the tripod backwards and forwards as well, just because the depth of field is so narrow. And sometimes, rather than try and shuffle my subject or shuffle the camera within the tripod plate, I'll just kind of swing that tripod, or even better, if it's a monopod, it's easier. Superb. And I'm going to just move that on there. It'll go. There we go. So lots of other things that you can use with macro. You can use high res shots for a single shot of macro, not with focus stacking. There are ways to do it with focus stacking. If you want to do a kind of a more dedicated setup, it is possible to do it. It's a bit more complex, but absolutely possible. But for single shot macro, you can use the high resolution shooting mode and just have it on a nice, easy to use button as well. This is superb for single shots. And if you're on a tripod, you can use flash as well. So really, really nice and fun. Let's see if I can drag a few questions in so that we're hitting some of them. There's so many questions, and guys, I'm so sorry if I don't answer all your questions. Please do come back to the comment section when the video live is finished so that you can leave a permanent comment or question, and I will try and help you out in that kind of after the live is finished. Okay, so right, this is a great question that I'm just going to tackle. Bernie Richardson has said, using the Raynox 250 with the 90mm, is it worth using? No, it really isn't. There'll be a few people in the chat here that will say, don't do it, because the image quality drops off severely. Now, this is contrary to using a Raynox 250 with the 60mm macro, which is superb. It's a great combination. Did that for many, many years, had some really excellent results from it. But myself and a few other people in the macro community have put the Raynox magnification adapter lens on the front of the 90mm, and it's really kind of ruined the image output because there is so much going on with the 90mm. I think it's just too much. That's my opinion, and the opinion of a few others, but I would say don't use the Raynox 250 with the 90, but absolutely do use it with the 60 and the 30 for sure. Brilliant question. What else have we got in the presentation? Let's see. So you got focus stacking, absolutely fantastic. I can't give you a live demo of focus stacking, sadly, because the way that I use a cable to show you everything, it doesn't kind of come through. But we do have some sessions on focus stacking on the OMDS events page that come around sort of on a monthly basis. And we have a much better setup in the fact that we do like a real overhead view of everything, so you can see what's going on the camera. So if you're interested in seeing some of that, then keep checking into the OMDS events page and we'll be able to show you how to do those things and various other topics that are on there as well. But you can do up to 15 shots in camera. If you've got an EM5 or an OM5, you're going to do up to 8 shots in camera, and that's going to create a final stacked version for you as well, which is, you know, superb when you want to do things like this, like the hoarfrost or the snowflakes. And of course, that Super Spot AF that I talked about is a great way to manually focus on a tighter area. So you can assign a magnification button to any button on your camera that's useful for you. You will press this button once when you want to use it, and you'll be given a green frame. That's to tell you where the camera is going to magnify when you press the button one more time, and then it zooms into that area. You can move it around with a joystick if you want to at this point. And you can also adjust the zoom factor with that thumb wheel, like I said. If you press and hold the assigned button that you have Magnify attached to, you'll go back to a normal view and you'll be able to shoot as you were. Oh, fantastic. There we go. So that is all of the slides that I wanted to show you. And it is a very kind of speedy run through in the time that I've got available, plus answering some of the questions as well. So hopefully there's been some information that you've been able to pick through on that one. I'm just now also going to have a quick check through here. I'm just going to bring Ed's question back up as well. You didn't miss anything, Edward. No, you can focus with the back button if you want to use autofocus. But if you're using the back button, you don't need to worry about half press. So the back button will focus and kick in the image stabilization at the same time. The half press is on the front shutter button, which you only need to really think about when you're using manual focus, because you do it anyway in autofocus. Great question. Mick has asked, when working with higher magnifications, would you recommend using a cable release? Yeah, I've got mine going on here. So yes, absolutely. Use a cable release if you've got one. If you're not hooked up to all this business like I am, then you can also use the OI image share app on your phone as well. Or, of course, there is OM Capture, which is tethering software for your laptop or your Mac or whatever else like that. So if you're in a studio environment and you want to set up and have a bigger screen and control everything like that, you can look at OM Capture. And again, I do a session on OM Capture on the OMDS events page as well. So that's usually either every month or every other month as well. And that's really fun. There's loads of stuff on that software. And the software is free as well. So there we go, Peter. Fantastic, Peter. Yeah, the 90mm and the Mac and the Raynox is a waste of time. There's too much going on. The 90mm doesn't need any help. It is fantastic on its own. And if I remember rightly, Peter, I did also key your other message, which, well, we won't bring these into it, but experience of using OI workspace in remote mode for macro. So I think that is a reference to OM Capture, which is fantastic. I have used OM Capture out in the field as well. I've got a little laptop that kind of folds up into a tablet, a bit like the Microsoft Surface. And because I can connect by a USB cable, I've taken it out on a nice day and I've shot with it in the wild. but OM Capture is very, very useful. And of course, the phone app OM Image Share is also great as a release. You can just kind of press it and you don't have to touch your camera, which is super good. I hope you and your knees are more successful. Thank you so much for your question. Okay, so I'm going to here we go. Look, and as I said it, Klaus is tethering to the Surface PC, even in nature. Yeah, absolutely. Me and you, Klaus. Yeah, we're on the same level. That's what's going on. Good. Okay, I'm going to fire up a camera over here and try and cross over the feed somewhat, and we will see. And I've got my favorite autumn stuff. This is dead flowers from the little bushes outside, and only because a couple of things. They look really cool and cranky when they're dying and they're all dried up, and you put a certain sort of diffused flashlight on them. But also sometimes you can get some little critters that just hide in there, little tiny mites and things like that, and they come out, and you can get some good shots of those as well. So with the 10 minutes that we have left or thereabouts, let's see if we can move that over. There we go. Okay, so excuse my squeaky chair as I kind of roll myself into position. But what you're seeing here is an OM1 with a 90mm macro lens on there. It's not shooting at 2:1 or anywhere near at the moment. So this is not even shooting at 1:1 at the moment. So this is kind of out there. And you'll notice that I have got night live view switched on as a focusing assistant. But I wanted to show you this because it is very dark in here. And I want to show you, if I now start to manually focus on this kind of dead and dying flower buds, what night LV does, the darker it is. And it is really dark in here. So if I now try and start to focus, you can see how that frame rate is quite slow, really, in comparison to what you would expect. And that's purely because the camera is working super hard to brighten up what is a very dark little corner over here. Yes, there are nice cobwebs, John. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop on my LED light, which has brightened things up incredibly. And night LV is still on, but because the camera now has access to more light, that frame rate is nowhere near as slow. But with that in mind, I'm going to go into the menu. I'm going to switch night vision off. We'll just use the LED light for the purposes of this tonight so that you guys can see it all. And that is in the menu under the gear tab and page 3 where it says night vision. We'll just pop that off. Okay, good stuff. So now we're seeing the light as it is. Okay, so if we weren't shooting with flash, we'd pretty much be getting what we see there. It's going to be a 1.5 underexposed according to my exposure meter at the bottom. And that's because I'm shooting at 1/250th of a second at f10 in very, very low light. Now I can open up my aperture. That stops my ISO from flashing at its maximum. And it allows me to take a 1600 ISO shot, which is, again, not the greatest, but it's not flashing at its maximum. But it's still going to be very, very challenging in these conditions. I'm just going to get a little focus on that one there. So ultimately, shooting at f3.5 at this distance isn't going to be too damaging. So let me pop my flash on. I'm going to just turn down the power of my little focusing assistant there. And I've got my flash on TTL, which is automatic. The camera and the flash are working together to work out exactly what flash is needed here. I'm at 1/250th of a second because that's the maximum sync of normal flash. And f3.5, probably about 20 centimeters away from the front element, so nowhere near life size. Let's have a little look at that. And at this distance, f3.5 isn't giving us a bad depth of field. It's pretty much getting most of that bud in focus. And if we look in here, we've got some pretty nice detail. But it is still challenging because you can see that the depth of field drops out in there. That's probably about 5 millimeters worth of depth of field before we lose the front part of that bud and it starts to lose the back part. And that's working at f3.5 at that distance. But obviously, we still want to maintain a nice out of focus area in the background. So it's kind of challenging to want to stop down to anything else. Now, when we talk about stopping down, this lens can comfortably cope with quite a heavy stop down. So I will shoot between f10 and f13 quite regularly on this lens. I'm going to shoot at f11 today. Just go right back in the middle. And that's going to achieve a reasonably good depth of field. But obviously, bearing in mind, it will bring whatever is in the background into focus more as well. So let me turn my focus assistant up a little bit. Now, because I want to be sure of where that focal plane is going to be, I'm going to bring in one of those manual focus assistants. So I'm going to press the menu key and I'm going to go over to the green AF tab. And in that AF tab, I'm going to find the manual focusing options over in page 7. Top option here is manual focus assist. And I've got an option for magnify or peaking. At this stage, I'm just going to use peaking and I'm going to switch that on. Now that that's on, it will come into play as soon as I start to manually focus. Now I have the clutch pulled back on this lens, so it's forced into manual focus in this way. So as soon as I start turning this ring now, you'll see here that I get this kind of red flash over here. Now, just so you know as well, whilst doing this, because I'm manually handling the lens, I am halfway pressing my shutter button to just make sure my stabilization kicks in. Now, I know that you can also see that little fella walking around in the background there. There's a tiny little mite or a tiny little spider just in there that we can have a look at later on. But for now, I'm just going to use this focus peaking to get to the central focus plane of that little bud just there. So it's going to be about there. Well, that's the front section, okay? So it's definitely going to get me the front closest part of that bud to me. And now that we're at f11, we can take that shot and have a little look at how that depth of field has improved. Wow, it's improved massively. I can see that already without even going in. So now I'm actually getting the whole, pretty much the whole depth of that small kind of dead bud. And as well as our little friend in the background just escaped having his photograph taken just up here. That little orange blob is a little mite up there. So I knew there was a few floating around in there. But this is nowhere near one-to-one magnification. So let's use that as a basis for size, okay? I'm then going to put my limiter switch into the central part, which is 0.25 to 0.5 on the 90mm macro. I'm then going to bring my focus as close to me as I possibly can until it won't refocus anymore. And because I'm all set up and I can do this, I'm going to physically move my subject closer to my lens to achieve one-to-one. Okay, so getting closer, 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 closer. And it's going to be about there. And I'll re-angle the lens in just a second. Okay, so about there. And then if we kind of have a little look up at this one here, should be able to just bring that in just now. There we go. So I've moved that now. And the closest point there that's in focus, which is the very, very front section of that bud, just flickering there in red with my my focus peaking. There we go. Let's find it just about there. So that's the oh no, not that. That's just not quite doing it. Let's go to about there. There we go. I might just need to move it a bit further away. This is one of the challenges, that it was actually a tad too close. So about there. Good. Okay. So now this is one-to-one. So this is slightly bigger, and it's going to give us a much narrower depth of field. There is a couple of little bugs wandering around on there. We'll see if we can get their photograph in just a second. But this is basically now what we're achieving at one-to-one at f11. There we go. Let's take the picture. And you guys are going to hate me because I'm going to go hunting that mite in a second and see if we can find it. There we go. So this, again, is now one-to-one. So we've gone from this, which is definitely not one-to-one. It's probably about 1 to 1 to 3 or something like that. This is one-to-one life-size magnification. And the detail that we can get at this level on that tiny little bud, which I think is probably, if we look at this view, that whole section there is probably about 10 millimeters across. So we've really kind of improved things, but you saw already it was very challenging to try and get the right place in that. And I've basically locked off the manual focus point to where I wanted to be and brought the subject to me. And if you were in the wild, you would take yourself to the subject in order to do that. And obviously there are different things that can come into play, like angry insects that you don't want to get close to. And the 90mm makes it easier to focus on bees and butterflies because you don't need to be so close. You can be further away. But this is just what I said at the beginning, is we don't have to shoot 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 or 4-to-1. But if you do, this is the way we're going to do it. So let's see if we can find our little friend on there somewhere. And they're probably going to make me really work for this. So let's just see if there's one around and they wander into my food. So this is also a little thing as well. If you've got a very active insect in there, you might sometimes want to wait for them to walk into your plane of focus. And there's one at the background there, and he possibly won't come anywhere nearer to us, but it's worth us trying to think about it. So I've got my finger on the trigger on my remote shutter cable, and let's see if we can't find someone who's active out here. And I won't put too much time into this, because this is the thing with nature, is that they'll do exactly what they want, and rightly so as well. Let me just see if we can do that. I might try and turn this because oh, there he is. There he is. He's quite active. Let's just see. He's going to hide. Let's see if we got him there. Probably not in those two, but we'll give it a go. Let's have a look. Yeah, we kind of got him here. Yes, there he is. Okay. So we got that one and that one. Out of the two, they're both a little bit out of focus. Now, I don't want to brag at all, but before I started, I did catch one. So because I knew they were going to fight me with this. So I did capture one whilst I was setting up earlier on. And there's the little fella just there. And this was when shooting at 1:1. Okay, so this was a 1:1 reproduction. So that tiny little mite is probably somewhere around less than 0.5 millimeter, and maybe even less than that. Roger, no, I'm not using a focus rail. I've just got my camera on a tripod. So that was my little cheat of finding those little bugs. So there he is. You see, now that I've shown you, I knew he was going to come and play fair with us. So let's just see if we can get him again as well. There's a few of them on there. No, you can, and this is the key to mangoes. You're just going to kind of snap away until you get something. Maybe if I bring this in even closer, we'll get him. So just to tie up the session, because we've gone over the hour here, and they'll be shouting at me. I'm going to just pull this now into Super Macros. So I'm going to flick the switch on the front of that lens, and I can now turn my lens to the 2x point because I've got that focus clutch pulled back. It's now focusing at exactly 2 times, which means I can get even closer. Even closer. Let's see where that even closer is, which is about there. Excuse me. We're just going to be outside 2:1. So this is now 2:1. Let's see. That's brightened that up a lot. Let's see if we can just redirect that a tiny bit to get. Oh, there's something quite nice and impressive there on the top. So what I'm trying to achieve here is just to show you is that every time we get closer, the depth of field becomes narrower and narrower and narrower. Okay, and that is by the very nature of macro photography. So shooting at f11 is the fantastic point. And it may well be that we now get these little insects coming into play. Let's just see. I might have got that little one at the left there. We don't know. Let's have a little look. He's quite pale, so the flash might have reflected off him quite heavily. But let's see what we got here. That's not him. It might be. That might be him. That was definitely what was moving around. So, not quite sure. I think he's hiding behind that little tuft of something there. Let's see if we can get in there again. They're very active at this point. So, let's see. And they've probably now gone home now that I've said that. There's one up at the top. And so, like I said, part of the key to macro is you're just going to be sitting here for hours looking for things like this. And this is the extreme end of things. But just to give you an idea, I'm going to focus on that little kind of curl at the end of the dead bud there. Just going to bring that in a little bit, just to show you exactly what we're working with in terms of depth of field. That is the closest point to me on that tiny little dead tendril. I'm just going to bring it halfway through. At f11, it's the narrowest of depth of field. And it's really, really kind of pushing that. But here we go. It's just such a narrow depth of field. But this tendril must be, yeah, 2/10 or 3/10 of a millimeter, or 1/3 of a millimeter wide. It's such a narrow depth of field. So you have to play around with it a lot. And that just gives you an example of how those magnifications change. All right. Now, what's really important is that you can now step into focus stacking and you can add more images in there. And sadly, that's not something that I can do live for you to show you here. But what I will say, very, very important, is that there are a couple of things, key things to think about. I'm just going to bring my camera back up just here for you. There we go. If you're going to focus stack with flash, you need to bear in mind that that whole process takes a little bit longer because we're waiting for that flash to recycle every time, and that will depend on the flash type that you're using and the batteries as well. So that's really key to remember. And if you're using natural light, focus stacking happens almost instantly if you've got the right shutter speed. So anything over 200 per second is going to just kind of run. Yes, John, this is why OM needs to include an insect autofocus algorithm. Although I'm sure, I mean, maybe at that level with this light, even that will probably struggle. But excellent point. Yes. Do you have recommendations for a monopod that you like? To be honest with you, I'm not sure if I get into trouble saying that or not, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I use, and it's not for everybody, I use Three-Legged Things Bucky tripod, which turns into a monopod. You kind of unscrew one of the legs and stick the head on it, and it is a monopod. And that's the Three-Legged Thing Bucky. And I use it because it's really light, and it comes in copper, which is one of my favorite colors. So that's super useful. So I have a tripod and a monopod at the same time. And if I'm just going out with a mono, I take the leg off, which is the mono part, the singular leg, and I add the top neck section to that, and I leave the bits in the car, and off I go with a monopod. So that's what I use. Excellent stuff. So, like, I'm really aware that we are, every time we do these tech sessions, we're just scratching the surface. Really, really kind of key to let you know that I would give you more if I had more time. But with that in mind, pop your comments into the video once the live has ended, because then they're preserved forever because the live chat goes away. And I'll do my best to answer anything else. Keep on top of the events that are going on OMDS. Most of our Zoom sessions are free. We do real world stuff as well. It's global. So if English isn't your first language, you'll probably be able to find somebody that is, or a better preference for you. And we've got loads of other stuff going on, and keep giving us your feedback. Really, really important. Thank you so much to everybody that took part in the poll this evening. Really, really nice to see you. 505 votes, which is astonishing. I really appreciate all that engagement. For now, I'm going to leave you. Hopefully we'll be back with a Tech Thursday in November. We do get busy towards Christmas. There'll be tons of stuff going on with the Claires, Tito, Thomas, PJ, Thierry, Niels, all of the experts, all of the ambassadors, tons of stuff going on. But thank you so much for sticking with us. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you're new to us, I hope you come back again. But it's been really fun. And now I have to find my exit video because I can't be the one to not find it. But there you go. Thanks, everybody. Have a safe day or evening wherever you are.